as well, which is what's on the T-shirt.
What is it? So a guy.
It's just a policeman. And because Dick Nolan was a comic character.
Right.
He was an American highway cop, and it was in Tiger and Scorcher or something like that. And I don't know whether they'd syndicated it from an American comic or it was just someone with American aspirations. And so that's where they got it from.
We're talking cult figures. This is, what is it? 50 Minutes Chain Part 2. They'll cook for Part 3 in a way. We're actually here this time to talk about Hungry Beat. A fantastic book, and there's a single in the back there. So what's on that?
Joseph K on one side and Fire Engine on the other.
Fantastic.
It's, limited edition.
So what's this book for fans of? What sort of bands should you read this if you're into?
What bands now?
No, bands that are in the book.
Right, okay. Well, as you can see, that's Davey Henderson on the cover from Fire Engines. And it's a history really of the East Coast and West Coast of Scotland, kind of parallel music scenes, which began in the late 70s. Postcard Records of Scotland, founded by Alan Horn and Edwin Collins, and they released records by Orange Juice, Joseph K, Aztec Camera, and all the way from Australia, Go-Betweens.
All right, okay.
And interestingly, out of those four bands, Orange Juice went to Polydor, Aztec Camera went to Rough Trade, and then a major label, I'm not sure which. Joseph K released one album on Postcard and ended. Paul Haig, the singer, was signed to various people. Martin Ross, the guitarist, joined Orange Juice and then joined Aztec Camera. Interesting. Go-Betweens went to Rough Trade and blah blah blah. And then over on the East Coast in Edinburgh, you had Fast Product, founded by Bob Last, now a film producer, and Hilary Morrison, who is an artist and did sort of a lot of the photography for the records. And they released records. They were interesting because although they were Edinburgh based, and although Postcard had an Australian band on their roster, the first records Fast put out were by bands from Sheffield and Leeds.
All right.
They put out the first records by the Mekons.
Oh, okay. Where were
the
you?
Human League, Gang of Four.
Right.
They didn't release a record by a Scottish band until Scar's first single, Adultery and Horror Show, and then their last record was Dead Kennedys, Holiday in Cambodia.
Wow.
This had all happened in about 18 months, 2-year period. In between, they put out who else? Oh, yeah, there was a kind of series of records they put out called Earcom, which is like a magazine type style compilations. Like the first one had, because Bob Last had been a roadie and tour manager with the Zillows, and so all kind of that, and that's how he ended up meeting all the bands in Sheffield and Leeds who sort of played support to the Zillows. So the Zillows play a very important part in that book, and Joe Callis and the Zillows, when the Human League, well, because the story of the book is really the tale of the DIY-ness to commercial glory, or not, but when everyone was trying to subvert the mainstream and get major record deals. And Grant's film Big Gold Dream, that's the story that told. And so you go from running record labels out of your wardrobe, which Postcard has done in Alan Horn's wardrobe, or a flat next to the Art College in Edinburgh with Fast Product, to signing the Human League to Virgin Records, splitting the band in two, so you get Heaven 17 and Human League, and bringing Joe Callis into who was in the Zillows, into the Human League, who then co-writes Don't You Want Me, and having a Christmas #1 across the world. And it's like that kind of trajectory from DIY roots to commercial greatness. That's what kind of which failed in other respects. There was a lot of money floating around from major record labels during that period, and not everyone got that same crossover success. Orange Juice did it with Rip It Up. Win, which was Davey Henson, Russell Burns of the Fire Engines, post Fire Engines band, was signed, and this glossy thing. Yeah, You've Got the Power, which was a glorious record, which should have been Christmas #1, but for whatever reason, it didn't happen. And so it's that trajectory really, and of how ambition, it's about attitude and ambition and subversion, and kind of starting a cultural revolution really. Because I don't say that lightly, because the kind of the ramifications or the trickle down is the wrong phrase, because that's a horrible Tory phrase, but the effects 40 years on of that are still being felt culturally. I think they're influenced not just on music but on film and everything else.
I saw a guy, Jesse was moaning on Twitter, it might have been because of this book, Hungry Beat, but he was talking about the ongoing fetishization of the Scottish indie music scene of the 80s and 90s. Mm-hmm. I feel like this guy's fed up with it or something. Well, that does show you that when people are starting to complain about it, something is actually making quite a big impact so long after it's happened.
Yeah, I mean, look, I can see his point, but let's not forget, it's only fairly recently that people have been talking about it. Yeah. When Simon Reynolds wrote his book Rip It Up, named after the Orange Juice song in, when was that, 15 years ago? Something like that. And, until that came out, no one was really talking about it. I've written articles in the early noughties about Joseph Kay and stuff like that. And really having to justify it because no one was interested. The rise of Franz Ferdinand helped. Actually, that doesn't go into that in the book, but the rise of Franz Ferdinand and their referencing. We were talking earlier about the references in the NME. So when you get a smart band like Franz Ferdinand, some of whom are art school educated, some of whom, but they all know, they've done their homework. They know where they're coming from, and if they're dropping names like the Monochrome Set and Joseph Kay, that has a little effect. So Joseph Kay started getting noticed again on the back of that, and
Fire Engines reformed supporting for a couple of gigs.
Yes, they did. I think it was the SEC, and they did a split single together. And Fire Engines reformed to support the Magic Band and at Liquid Rooms and Sunrise Orchestra.
There's amazing bands like that were playing maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I think now if they were doing it, it would be a much bigger deal. They'd be like getting £5 million or something.
Well, absolutely. Absolutely.
If Orange Juice were to reform now, that could be a big...
It could. I don't think that's ever going to happen. The same as Joseph Kay would never reform. I know that's never going to happen because I don't think Paul Haig would do it. And but they could. If people wanted to chuck money at it, it would. But I think people are staying pure because even when the Fire Engines reformed fleetingly, it was for a specific purpose of one night only, and that's your lot. And now Davey Henson's saying he's retired completely. But I would love to think that he's still going to make more music, and I hope he does. But yeah, these people deserve their due. The Postcard story was known a bit better, I think, because there was a book a few years ago which Simon Goddard did. I can't remember the name of it, but that was a kind of history of Postcard. But the Fast Product story is known less. And again, that's a difference between Glasgow and Edinburgh, where Glasgow is much more upfront and all the rest of it, and Edinburgh and Fast Product is just a bit more opaque. and is less likely to shout from the rooftops of what your achievements were. And because they weren't strictly about bands from Edinburgh, that, you know, not many people, until Grantsville, until Big Gold Dream, no one really knew about it, unless you were there, or unless you were interested on the cusp of it. You know, I mean, I was old enough to be interested in all of that, and bought the Earcom records, and bought the Fire Engine singles and all the rest of it. I never saw Fire Engines or Joseph Kay. I didn't see Paul until he was with the Belgian label, the Disque du Crépuscule, and they did a tour of his solo work, and the band was, this is a super group, of Paul, I think Malcolm played, and Alan Rankin from the Associates, and I think Stephen Harrison from Metro Pack, and like, so there was that. But I mean, I saw Orange Juice in the summer of 1981, which is kind of pivotal gig for me. You know, up until that point, it seemed.
Where was that?
That was a club in Liverpool called, well, it was called Plato's Ballroom, which is kind of, but the venue itself was Mr. Pickwick's, which was a kind of chicken in the basket cabaret club, which had been around since the 60s. I always think of it as the sort of place that Tony Hatch and Jackie Trent probably wrote about in Downtown, where you've got these kind of shishi Northern English cabaret, and Tony Christie probably played there and stuff like that. And then, but suddenly, for 8 Wednesdays throughout 1981, it became this kind of arts lab where you had, the first one was New Order and Sector 25 and a Liverpool band, they were both on Factory, and a Liverpool band called Send No Flowers, who put a couple of records out. And but beyond that, the poster had described it as like art videotech. This is 1981. What's a videotech? Videotech, and they would show kind of Louis Buñuel films, and then Sharon Galoo and things like that. And there was performance art going on and stuff like that. And you know, I was 16. I'm like, so the first few of them, they were all the Factory bands. New Order, Certain Ratio, Dirty Column.
Did you feel connected to the Manchester bands? Do like Edinburgh and Manchester have a similar Glasgow-Edinburgh relationship? I remember I went to Manchester for the time I messaged you, I was like, oh, I'm in Manchester. And you must be like, why? What's that got to do with me? But for me, they're like kind of adjacent cities in a similar location.
Well, I know what you mean. And I mean, Manchester was, I suppose, or the image anyway, was, you know, it had Tony Wilson and it had, you know, Joy Division and all of that. Joy Division were released on Fast Product incidentally on one of the second Earcom, and as Bob Last said in Grant's film, and it's in the book as well, Tony Wilson went to Bob about how to do a record label.
Oh, right, okay.
And Bob said, half jokingly, Factory was Fast 13. We never told Tony that. We gave, but yeah. So I mean, but the Factory thing, you know, it was very dark, and it felt very dark and intellectual and austere. Whereas the Liverpool scene was much more colourful and psychedelic or pseudo psychedelic, and you know, you had that history with Big in Japan, that kind of supergroup in reverse, which had Bill Drummond, Ian Brody, Holly Johnson, Dave Balfe, and Jane Casey, and others in the band, who obviously all went on to do much bigger things. And that, you know, that's the Liverpool scene in one band, who had come out of Deaf School, who were a kind of, how do you describe them? A kind of post-Roxy, pre-punk theatre cabaret thing, who were a big influence on Madness and Dexy's Midnight Runners. Clive Langer, who produced both of them, was in Deaf School, and who wrote Clive Lang, who wrote what do you call it, Shipbuilding with Elvis Costello, and like so everything connects up. You know, but if you go back to Deaf School and then to Big in Japan, in Liverpool, all pop culture kind of stems from there, in the way that it does from Fast Product and Postcard. But it's all connected. But I think at that age I was, as a serious young man, the darkness of perceived darkness of Factory appealed to me. But then, after you've had all that, they also put Jar Wobble on doing his first gig since he left Public Image. And then, but then in August, the style of the posters changed, and it was like this brilliant poster, which I've still got a copy of, for Orange Juice. And we knew Orange Juice because, you know, we had, you know, Blue Boy and all of it, Front Four and Laughing was out by then. So it was like, wow,
So
this has
proper
changed.
mainstream, wasn't it?
Well, not quite. It still had a kind of an edge to it, I think.
Yeah.
But it was
But
poppy.
it was popular,
Yeah, it was
yeah.
poppy. And then, but you know, that night was really significant for me. The other two bands on that night were the first gigs by two Liverpool bands, the Pale Fountains and the Wild Swans, and that all of that completely changed everything. They were post Bunnymen, post Teardrops, with connections that I didn't know at the time, and again they were using pop rather than avant-garde darkness or whatever, and you know, talking about Burt Bacharach and Sergio Mendes, as in the Pale Fountains case, and the Wild Swans talking about William Blake or whatever, and that kind of thing, and it was just one of my most significant musical nights, I think.
And I guess
And that's even
Teardrop-
before you got to Orange Juice.
Teardrop Explodes, Bunnymen.
Yes.
That must have been happening at the right time for you.
Yes. I mean, again, I was just that bit too young to go to it. I mean, I'm kicking myself now, all these years on, because Eric's Club, which was the club where Big in Japan were
I found talk
part
about
of.
it in Fall podcast.
Yeah, and it's like, I only ever went there once. It was on Saturday afternoons, they had under-18s matinee gigs.
Right.
Okay? And so I only went once in December '79 when I went to see Joy Division. And I was 15, so I was the right age for that. And but I've got flyers where it's like, why didn't I go and see those Saturday afternoon matinees from Echo and the Bunnymen and Teardrop Explodes? And you look at it, it's like, you know, B-52s for £1.25 and stuff like that. And it's like, it's crazy. And so there's all that. So I just missed out. I went to it once, but the influence was greater. Again, reading about it and seeing whatever bits of telly. Because we're in the north of England, we had Tony Wilson on Granada. Him and a guy called Dick Witts, who was in a band called The Passage. He took it, well, Tony Wilson did a show called What's On, which was an arts magazine programme. And then he did So It Goes and gave the Sex Pistols their first TV appearance.
Yeah, it's all in film, isn't it?
Yeah, but you'd watch it at tea time, and you know, 1 minute Tony Wilson would be reading the news or doing something stupid with the kite.
Hang
or
glide,
whatever,
yeah.
And then it'd be like, and here's Joy Division. And it'd be like, you know, I mean, Peter Hook says in Grant's film, you know, you'd be watching, you'd be literally having tea, and this stuff would be coming on. And
Like one show on the Joy, like Joy Division on the one show or something like that.
And it's like, and that must affect you.
Yeah.
You know, because Tony Wilson, when he was doing that, when he was reading the news and all that, you know, I always remember my mum was like, he wasn't like a proper newsreader. I liked him because he seemed, you know, my mum was like, I don't like that Tony Wilson, he's so sarcastic. And it's like, but that's the point. He didn't, you know, and that was before. Because when you started reading about Factory Records and that, it's like, hang on, that's that bloke off the telly. And you know, but you know, Peter Hook goes into this, you know, much more first hand than I, and it's like,
Really
it's
goes
crazy.
into things in his book.
Yes, well, exactly. Yeah.
Which is the great thing about this book. Like, the moaning about petty squabbles.
Well, it's really funny because whenever you see, I mean, this has been happening for at least 20 years. Whenever you see Peter Hook interviewed on the telly, he's like, oh, fucking Tony Wilson. It's like fucking the money. And it's like what all our money. Whereas you get Stephen Morris, and he's like, yeah, we were a bit daft. You know, we had to pay into the hacienda, but it's like.
He's always like, he stole my sleeping bag.
Yeah. Did you watch that Hacienda documentary last week?
I don't think. Was it new last week?
Yeah. It's a new
no,
one.
I've seen that. No.
I mean, both Hooky and Stephen Morris. Hooky's calmed down a bit,
right.
but Stephen Morris. I mean, he says at one point, he said like, you know, we all used to be mates when we were in the band, and now we're not, and that's very sad.
Yeah.
But anyway, to rewind. The factory thing and the zoo thing, I was very aware of that, and the postcard and fast thing. But that orange juice night, it kind of brought everything together. You know, I'd been going to gigs for about a year. I'd seen the Bunnymen and the Teardrop Explode at the university by that stage because they got bigger and they'd signed to a major label. And but seeing all the performance art stuff and the art films and that, it's like your world's being opened, and then it's opened again because you've got this pop band, or these pop bands, going somewhere else, being sarcastic and funny, and rather than being austere and not speaking to the audience, being cheeky and taking the piss. And that really changed things. And then you're reading about the Fire Engines, and Joseph Kay, both of whom I loved at the time, and you know, the best one, and that's in the book as well, is when Paul Morley interviewed Jerry Garcia from the Grateful Dead, and Morley said to Garcia, he said, "Have you heard of a band called Fire Engines? They do 15-minute sets. You do 15-minute guitar solos." And it's like, that's how far apart the worlds were. You know, everyone's terribly nice about things now, and it's all kind of culturally relativist, and you can join the dots. But then it was quite tribalistic, and this was like year zero. You know, so, and Fire Engines, I mean, look at the urgency on Davey Henderson's face there. It's you know, it's a thrill. I would have loved to have seen them in 1980-81. And reading interviews with Bob Last at the time and Alan Moore, you know, like, and Bill Drummond and Tony Wilson, these were the people with ideas, and you absorb all that.
I think knowing some of these guys a wee bit more through being in a band and meeting them rather than like being interested in them before that. Like, it's quite interesting that they don't hate it or love it. They're all quite matter of fact about it. It's kind of not a big fuss for them.
No.
You know, they've got a life to get on with.
Yes.
You know.
Well, that again, it's an Edinburgh thing. Nobody's playing rock stars.
No.
They're just doing it, and it's like, you know, I mean, Davey Henderson is probably the most rock and roll person I know in terms of attitude, and you know, when you see him live, you know, go from the Nectarine No. 9 after Win, when the Nectarine No. 9 formed, and they were just like pure rock. I mean, Saint, I've forgotten the name of it now, Saint Jack, which is just like one of the greatest rock albums made over the last 30 years, I think. And then Sexual Objects, which was a bit poppier, but kind of an extension of Nectarines. And again, the joy and the attitude that ensues when you see them live, and the songs are great. And the songs are great. And, you know, I mean, I don't know whether you remember when the NME in 1981, they did a cassette with Rough Trade called C81.
Don't remember it.
Right.
I read about it.
No, C8, yeah. You had to save coupons from the NME. I think you saved 2 coupons, and then you had to send off for it and then wait 28 days for delivery before you got this incredible compilation of mainly rough trade bands. Like it opened with an early version of The Sweetest Girl by Split and Quit, and then you had Pere Ubu, Essential Logic, Red Crayola, all these early rough trade bands, pre-Smiths era rough trade, but it didn't have any of the fast artists, but it had Orange Juice, Joseph K, and Aztec Camera. But you got this little cutout booklet, which you had to cut out of the paper, which I've still got because there's a little blurb. But, each one got a little page. It's about this big, and each band gets a page, which they've done themselves. But for each of the postcard bands, there's a page, probably written by Alan Horn, which says each one just talks about which Velvet Underground album you like.
Okay.
And it just talks about the Velvet Underground and how John had to, and it's like, but everyone goes, like in Big Gold Dream, and the influence of the Velvet Underground looms large over everyone. But if push came to shove, and it's a bad comparison in many ways, because you shouldn't be comparing because they're artists in their own right. But Davy Henderson in Scotland is real on so many levels. He's a genius artist and he writes great songs. No, he's not junkie. And yes,
Sorry, David.
that's all right. I'm not David, but
Sorry.
but yes, I forgot what your question was now. But
My question was, how did the book come about, and how did it all? A book with 3 authors, that sounds a bit unwieldy. How does it all work?
okay, well, I mean, it was a done deal by the time I was asked to get involved.
Right.
How it came about, as I understand it, was Douglas was talking with Stephen Pastor at Monorail one day, where we did the Glasgow launch book with the bands, the Hungry Beat band playing, who, if this goes out before Saturday night, will be playing.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Tell us about the event.
We'll tell you about the event in a minute, but and I think Douglas had said, it'd be great to get Grant, because Grant's done the movie,
Yeah.
and that was
Number 2.
a hit, and he did the 2, Teenage Superstars after that, and there's little bits here and there, the shorts of that, and there's a massive material which remains unseen, and as I understand it, Douglas was talking to Stephen Pastor, wouldn't it be great to compile all this in a book? And Stephen said, you should speak to White Rabbit Books. And Douglas, I don't know what he did, but he spoke to Lee Braxton, who's the publisher there, and that was it. I mean, him and Grant, I don't know how long they've been working on it, for about a year, I think, and knitting together. It's not just to say it's an oral history, but it's not just a straight rehash of the film. It's expanded, there's new stuff, there's the stuff that's in the film there, but it's expanded and all the rest of it. And there's archival interviews, because there were some people who didn't want to talk, and that's fair enough.
Grant is retired. Did he retire? Do you know? And then change his mind? I thought he'd given it up. Maybe he retired from filmmaking to do a book. I don't know.
Oh, he's making. Well, I know of at least one film that he's making. at the
Well,
moment.
yeah, like some people retire and then get busier than ever. I thought it might be one of those things.
I hadn't heard about the retirement. I know he's definitely not retired. Well, he's certainly, he's doing. I mean, he's working on not Game of Thrones, the other one.
Not Highlander. the other
Outlander,
one. Outlander, yeah.
And it's like, but in his own directing career, it's going great guns. I know of one, possibly 2 film, which it wouldn't be right for me to say what it is, but it's potentially going to be fantastic. And I've seen bits of it, and it's in a similar vein to this, shall we say? And but no, Grant's not retired.
Okay, you've got head in here first.
And so why the hell would Grant retire?
Nothing really makes sense to me.
But
Maybe just meant he'd retired from the evening and I understood it.
yeah, well, and yeah, presumably they got together and they were knitting stuff together and all the rest of it. And then Douglas got in touch with me and asked me to get involved. I did some interviews with Bob Last and Hilary Morrison and a couple of other things, and then it all kind of, that's it.
So what sort of time period is this? Did it take,
Well, we were still kind of, it was lockdown period, and the process was quite interesting because they sent me what they'd done, and then I got on with doing other things. Bear in mind we're all doing other things on top of this, but because it was lockdown, there was a lot of space opened up.
Yeah.
A lot of unpaid space opened up. And so I was able to do interviews and bits and bobs of other stuff, and that was it. And sometimes we were in touch 10 times a day, sometimes we weren't in touch for weeks, and then you would occasionally, someone would occasionally pull something and like blah blah blah, and then that would open another door, and so it is. But Douglas has really been the driving force behind it. He is, he's the one who's knitted everything together and has been really executive producer. He's the one who liaised with the publishers and everything like that, while me and Grant were off, being poncy artists about town. And he's kind of knitted it all together and taken this potential Frankenstein's monster and knitted it together into a narrative and done the adjoining bits between the oral history. And I think once it was decided that it was going to be an oral history, that changed things, and that was the way to do it. And that was it.
And the way I can see it, it's been a big hit, hasn't it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I hope so.
Well, I tried to get a copy with the single and Monorail, and that sold out. And then I thought, well, I'll just pick a normal copy when I'm in the shop, like some records I've ordered anyway. And they were sold out there.
Really?
So I've got two experiences of trying to buy it and not managing to get it.
Well, I mean.
I'm sure it's out there if you want it. Don't give up.
Yes, we just say, Hungry Bee. It's available from White Rabbit Books and hopefully at a store near you. At All Goods, pending distribution, shall we say.
And there's a show on this weekend?
Yes.
And more to come, is that right?
Yeah, because we launched the book initially at Portobello Books.
Yeah.
In Portobello. Lovely. I mean, I'd never been to Porty Books before, but what a place. It's beautiful.
It's quite new. It's only a few years old, isn't it?
Yeah. And the care that they have, it's like, it's a joy. It's like, because the second one, the Glasgow one we did in Monorail, because of the connection with Stephen and everything, it was totally right to do that. And that was expanded because the Hungry Beat group, which is a kind of super group of various members of people in the book, including Malcolm Ross from Joseph K, Orange Juice as the camera, Campbell Owens from As the Camera, Bobby, yes, good call. Bobby Bluebell, and Bobby Bluebell did the Glasgow show because Ken McCluskey was supposed to do it, but he wasn't well. And we had Monica Queen from etc. and solo artists, and Katie Leroney from Secret Goldfish and Fizz Bombs, a generation on from the period that's in this book, the Edinburgh bands, and they were guest vocalists on it. So there was a core backing band, and they did sort of, as I like to think of it, a supergroup in reverse doing greatest non-hits of bands that some of them used to be in. And because at that period, other than things like Rip It Up, which was a hit, none of these kind of, because of the way pop industry worked, none of them became hits in a big way.
So where's the show at the weekend?
The show at the weekend is that was it, we did the Monorail one, and then this Saturday at November the 19th at La Belle Angel off the Cowgate in Edinburgh. At 7 p.m. till 10 p.m. There will be music and conversation. Bob Last is going to be in conversation with Nicola Meehan of this parish, who did the interviews in Glasgow as well. And
She's proper, isn't she?
she's proper. So are you. Tam Dean Byrne is going to be doing readings, and I believe he might be doing a guest vocal with the band, and the band are doing...
Wouldn't put it past him.
No, I wouldn't put it past him. But that's happening on Saturday, and if this happens to go out before Friday,
So well, yeah.
listeners to Resonance FM, the community radio station in London, might like to check into Bad Punk. Bad Punk is a show run by Johnny Brown of the Band of Holy Joy,
Right,
who released
okay.
records on Rough Trade, and has also written plays. He wrote this amazing play years ago, which I can't remember the full title of it, it's really long, but it basically had Tam playing William Burroughs, someone else playing Kathy Acker, and Gary McCormack playing Johnny Thunders. But Bad Punk is this kind of musical mix of poetry and that, and like Tam's performed on it, doing plays written by Bill Drummond, playing Bill Drummond, and stuff like that. So on Friday night, I believe there's going to be a sound collage of, I don't want to say too much, but I think a kind of dub mega mix of Hungry Beat hits with Tam doing readings over the top.
A dub sound mega mix of Hungry Beat hits.
Yeah, I don't really,
No, you don't want to say any more.
No.
Don't want it to be oversubscribed.
No.
Put
And it's
that
like,
into there.
so that's on the Friday as a kind of great curtain raiser to what's happening on the Saturday when you can see it all in the flesh.
And unfortunately, it never happens, but I'm out of the country this weekend, so I can't attend.
Get you globetrotting.
I'm an international kind of guy. But is it going to be happening again anywhere else, somewhere maybe in February?
We hope so. Well, in February, there's going to be an event in Glasgow at Celtic Connections on February the 4th, I think it is.
If you can't make it to one, don't give up on the other.
Yeah, and that's going to be happening at the CCA, and that's going to be a kind of day-long event. In the afternoon, there'll be a couple of panel discussions. Possibly, well, we'll be involved, all three of us, with various other people at TBC. And in the evening, the Hungry Beat group again will be performing, as well as a set from Restricted Code, who were one of the bands who were on Pop Oral Records, which is the label that Bob Last and Hilary Morrison founded after Fast Product. And that was the kind of popular intent. That put out record. That was the label that put out the records by the Fire Engines, not Fast Product. They put out records by the Fire Engines. Hillary's band Flowers, Boots for Dancing, who you haven't mentioned, and Restricted Code, and others I can't remember the names of.
Boots for Dancing still going again?
I'm not sure, a bit. Well, I believe Dave Carson, the singer, might be doing a guest appearance on Saturday as well. So, we're going right back there to everyone, because, Boots for Dancing, Boots for Dancing, Flowers and Fire Engines, and previous to that, Dirty Reds, which is the band Tam was in, they were all connected by members, and let's not forget Thursdays as well with Paul Reiki, and because they released 2 tracks on Earcom 2, which was Thursdays do a phenomenal version
Paul
of
has been a
Poets.
Bengali entrepreneur, poet.
Yes.
God?
Yes, God, genius.
God genius.
The story, I said this the other day on EHFM, when I bought Earcom 2, primarily, let's face it, because of the 2 Joy Division tracks that were on it, which were unreleased, and there was 2 other bands on, Bassax, who I think were from Tyneside, and Thursdays, and they all did 2 tracks apiece, and this band called Thursdays did a phenomenal version of Sitting on the Dock of the Bay by Otis Redding in this really scratchy, glorious post-punk style. And many years later, when I first encountered Paul Reekie in the back room of the Antiquary, where he was doing this incredible poetry performance, I would say reading, but it wasn't a reading, it was a performance, wearing shades and a flying cap and just like, what is this? This is incredible. And it was years before I realised, put two and two together, and realised that Paul Reekie, the performance poet genius, who's sadly no longer with us, was the same guy who sang that version of Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, age 17.
Right.
And so all of these things connect up, and all of these stories, particularly in Edinburgh, as I say, it's more open in Glasgow. You know a bit more, but there's well, there's a lot that we don't know, possibly for good reasons. But you know, there's all these connections exist that go way back. And on Saturday night, Saturday November the 19th, at the Bell and Gel, 7 till 10 p.m. in Edinburgh, the Hungry Beat experience, featuring the Hungry Beat group with Tamdine Byrne and an all-star guest star crew, plus conversation with Bob Last, who was one of the co-founders of Fast Product and features in Hungry Beat quite a lot.
I mean, really, it's ridiculous this event isn't taking place in Murrayfield Stadium or something.
Well, and it's all for a tenner. It's cheap.
Yeah.
So do come along.
If you don't come along, you've got serious problems.
Yes. And there may be other events after that.
Yeah. And if you've stuck with us this long, you've got serious problems.